So having had the previous question, where I've expressed my concerns, on a similar but much smaller scale, I managed the construction of Southampton Football Club Stadium, which was about 34 million quid. And we had very strict rules about reporting cost overruns. There were very restricted number of people, like two of us, me and the managing director, who were able to sign off on variations. So I think my question is, number one, how are you going to manage variations? And number two, how are you going to keep this committee and, more importantly, Parliament in close touch with whatever cost overruns you are experiencing on a dynamic basis? Because otherwise we're going to end up with a nasty little shock some way down the line when most of us would have forgotten that this conversation's ever taken place. So are you going to make it a statutory requirement that you report back to this committee and Parliament? Are you going to formally notify any cost overruns on an ongoing basis? I mean, how are we going to deal with that? Because ultimately, as we've established, the taxpayer is going to be either the taxpayer or the electricity bill payer will be picking up the tab for this. So it's quite important that we all know, and it's transparent and clear, how the cost overruns are mounting up. So how are we going to do that?
You talk about the company.
Talk about the company first. So, I mean, the company will deploy, the corporate governance code. It kind of aspires to have the best levels of governance. You know, we've got a board structure that's got shareholder directors, independent non-exec directors, and an independent chair. Very few executives. You know, so it holds the executive to account, basically. Certainly from a personal point of view, I feel quite accountable, or very accountable. So every time we go to a board, we have to explain exactly where we are, what changes have been made in the month, where the kind of position is as far as contingency drawdown, as far as schedule's concerned, as well as overall company health. We'll report annually, so we'll produce we're a company that will produce an annual report, which is the first one's due out in end of July. And from that, there'll be complete visibility of where we are as a company. You know, what our challenges are, what our risks are, and where the project is.
Is that going to be mandatory?
So, if you were a properly quoted public company, you would be producing updates much quicker than once a year. So what public updates or even parliamentary updates will you be giving in between the annual report and accounts, so that we in Parliament, if things start to go wrong, can see that very quickly?
Well, we obviously, as part of our overall delegation of authority and obviously all the requirements around our shareholder agreement, we have to absolutely produce probably, certainly during a year, 25, 28 different reports, some of them monthly, some of them quarterly, some of them annually. We keep the department up to speed on a monthly basis. They get a monthly dashboard report from us that goes into the government body. Yeah, obviously the shareholders get a monthly report. The government shareholders get a monthly report.
How much of that is
lenders get a report, and also you've got something called the ITA. So as part of the RAB model, the ITA actually sign off on change and acceptability of spend. So we've got a lot of governance around spend.
I understand that, but how much of that monthly, in some cases updates, is going to be accountable to Parliament and therefore in the public domain?
That's not for me to ask Parliament.
The plan at the moment is to provide an annual report to Parliament that would use the data that comes from the company's annual report.
I suggest, Clive, that is not adequate. Even in HS2's case, they were producing 6 monthly reports, and even they were late because things were going wrong. We need to see regular updates for Parliament.
I'm pleased that you're also confident you're going to deliver the project, given your previous experience. But I think we have to come back to this committee's experience of past overruns, which set out with all the best intentions and end up in a catastrophe. So, I mean, I've just written here quickly a list of things that I think have already, if you like, set the headwinds against you. So, I mean, we've had Angela Rayner's Workers' Rights Act. That's pushed employment costs up. We've had Rachel Reeves's corporation tax increases and threshold cuts to NI, which has again pushed up the cost of businesses, which is all being passed on. So you've got construction cost inflation. We've mentioned the civil servants coming to kick a few tyres and waste a bit of time because they haven't got anything better to do on site. That's another issue. We've got the contractors who always find a reason to charge more unless you've got them very tightly tied down contractually. And as you know, very often once you've signed the contract, you become the hostage to the contract, and once you've signed it, your power is before you sign it, not after you've signed it. And particularly if you sign the wrong contract, which very many people do, and if the public sector, which is proven to be as bad at reading contracts, complex contracts with all sorts of nasty little heffalump traps in it, you get a problem there. You've got planning issues, and I know you're confident you haven't got planning issues, but we all know how deficient current planning law is, and we all know how difficult local councils are. I think we've all come across those. So, and we've also then got the national grid, which is an issue. I mean, you're a massive project. I don't know whether you're going to run into any grid issues, nor do you. I know that's been an issue for a lot of people. So I think this committee wants to know, we admire your confidence, but are you aware of all these risks, and are these going to knock you off course? I mean, I think you've got to be realistic about this.
Can I come back on the general point, and then Nigel can come and talk about how he's managing
Sterling might collapse too, by the way, in which case your costs go up.
So you cannot build a project of this scale, or indeed many energy projects, without having a degree of risk in construction. So that's true for offshore wind, that would be true for major network projects. I come from a background of sort of working with National Grid on their 90 projects to build the transmission system. There are lots of things like planning, like environmental consenting that you have to get through. So we are not sitting here today saying this project is without risk. What we have tried to build here is a structure that combines both the role of the government in a limited way for a reason, with commercial investors to set up a system that will best manage these risks and give us the best chance of delivery. Now, I'll leave Nigel to pick through each of the issues that you've highlighted, but all I would say is, without commenting on the policy nature of some of them, we have had a conversation about things like contractors, we've had conversations about planning, etc., as part of the setup of this programme. So, we're not sitting here saying there's no risk. We shouldn't do that, and we're not doing that. What we've done is set up a system that best manages it, and Nigel and his team are doing that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, well, just sort of picking the issues off one at a time. One again, we spent a lot of time looking at previous infrastructure projects and what could be learned from that. And I explained a little bit before around the retirement risk profile that we were aiming to achieve. I think one of the biggest risks remains around the productivity element of it. So when you've got lots of people on site, doing lots of things all over the place, it becomes difficult to control, difficult to manage productivity. So, as I say, we're attacking that in two ways, really. I explained, we're trying to take as much as possible into factories. The contractual model we're putting together under that part of the project really is we've gone into an alliance contracting model. So this is Sizewell C are actually part of the alliance. So we can see, the things where money's been wasted before on associates, affiliates, subcontracts, piling lots of kind of, I would say, white-collar workers into sites, etc., charging 12% on top of that. Massive amount of issues around that, but we're in making them decisions with the contractors. I think the other piece that we're focused on as well was, I know the big lessons from High Speed 2 is don't let too big a contracts, because once you've let them, they're really difficult to manage. So our big civils contracts, for example, we've split into about 30 different sub-packages. Each of them will be let, and each of them will actually require approval from the board. So you're not into sign big contracts, be disappointed for the next 10 years. This is about making choices along that journey as each of them sub-packages is let. So again, we've tried to really reflect where others have struggled and try to put mitigations in place to ensure that we do not fall into the same trap, because you have to be fairly humble that we could, and this is some of the things we're doing to ensure we don't. I think on the equipment, as I said to you before, I mean we're around 80% of our equipment's now signed with fixed price contracts. So why are we so confident that will deliver? We're now basically asking a manufacturer that was making 2 for Hinckley now to make 3 and 4 for Sizewell. So same machines, same manufacturing line, same people, helps with quality, helps with productivity, helps with
people
cost.
can go bust though, Nigel, as you know, so that can actually knock you off course. If you sign a fixed contract with somebody with a deficient balance sheet, they go bust, that costs you.
Yeah. No,
and on Lowestoft, you mentioned Lowestoft and you mentioned Hinkley Point C. Well, I happen to know that because in my constituency, and I want to ask you one more question about that in a mo, but I know for a fact that there's a lot of kit coming in from France, which is made in France. So to your point about how much of this is actually constructed in the UK, I think a lot of the big kit's still being made in France, and actually it's the French workers who are benefiting a lot from this too. So I mean, there's a lot of risk. I mean, you can talk about fixed price contracts, but unless you've vetted everybody you've got a counterparty risk with, people go bust, and people are going bust left, right, and centre, as you know.
We deploy a tool called Exiga, without kind of getting all techie, but I mean we basically monitor our whole supply chain almost on a weekly basis to make sure we try and manage a risk. When you've got such a large supply chain, and clearly that is a risk that we have to manage. As a company, we always have a monthly meeting to look whether that risk profile's changed. As you can imagine, the recent events in the Middle East, we're paying particular attention to some of that as we speak. So I think your point around France, I think we've got our major reactor components are being made in France at the moment, but a lot of their subcontracts are actually let in the UK as well. So we've got a lot of factories across the UK. So
manufacturing France and service industry UK, is that what you're saying?
No. So we're really pushing to, part of my desire is to leave a bigger footprint of manufacturing in the UK. We've just recently supported a company to open up a new factory in North Wales, which we're looking to use for pipe work as well as the current support systems that they're using. We're just about to expand the factory in Hull by twice as much as it previously was, where Hinkley were actually using it. So again, we're trying to expand the footprint of UK. This needs to be a UK project. It needs to expand the skill set in the UK, and it needs to expand the supply chain so it can serve others.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I had one question for all of you on coastline. Now, you're right on the coastline, and I haven't had a chance to look at exactly what you're going to be doing with regard to the shoreline. But you need to be very aware that if you do anything on the shoreline, and this comes back to my constituency in a place called Hemsby, which the government promised that they would sort out before the election. They've now seemingly failed to do that. But the point is, what happens at one point of the coastline as a result of onshore drift affects people down the coast. And if you're not very careful, if you do start interfering with the coastline, you could easily find yourself with a very large bill for what happens below you if you affect that onshore drift. Because what happens is you can create sandbars and scouring, and you can start to then see erosion on the coastline. Now, I know a fair bit about my constituency's coastline, but have you looked at all the contingent liabilities like that as well?
Yeah, so every structure that we build as a really quite robust modelling examination done on it from a coastline point of view. We've recently shared some of that with one of the local communities close to us at Thornton, which is struggling with coastal erosion. So we absolutely understand the impact of every kind of structure. I mean, most of the structure around the ground, to be honest, that we're going to build out to sea. Obviously, we're going to build quite a significant seawall, which will have a kind of rock armour frontage to it. But all that's been completely modelled for.
But if you do more to that coastline, Nigel.
Rupert, I'm really sorry. I want to just interrupt at this point because the Permanent Secretary has to go at 2:30. Is there any final message, Permanent Secretary?
Rachel's got a question.
Yes, no, but he has to leave. The hearing will continue, don't worry.
So the final message from me is this. This is a really important part of our energy mix. We think it's positive both ultimately for customers to diversify risk, but also for the local economy for economic growth. It's personally important for me, and we have put these structures in place to best manage that risk. I hesitate to say this given the question that's been asked, but it was my first visit to go down there to see live the progress that's been made. I promise we didn't distract them too much when we went down there, but that is part of how important it is for our overall portfolio. So I'm sure we'll be back here, but it is with the intention to deliver good value for customers, to make sure this project is delivered as well as possible. If we don't build things like this, we won't have the system that we need.
And I thank you, Permanent Secretary, for coming to this hearing today. You've got important business you've got to fly out to in the United States. We're grateful to you.
Thank you.
The hearing can continue. So, Rupert, you were questioning Nigel, I think. please.
Only about the coastline, because if you start building defences on the coastline, that's exactly what creates problems further down the coast. And in our case, as a result of sand being dumped above my constituency, it built a sandbar below, and you then got coastal erosion, which needs sea defences built there to stop houses being destroyed and other vast cost. So, I mean, you need to look at those contingent liabilities potentially if you're doing anything on the coastline. But that was just a general point. It's a sort of thing, Chairman, that just demonstrates how much contingent risk there is in it with a big project like this, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel. Rachel, did you have a question here?
I think are we on question?